Go ahead, my daughter said, her voice light, almost amused. Sign it, Mom. It's not like you'd understand it anyway. I heard the soft chuckle that followed, not just from her, but from her husband sitting beside her, the two of them exchanging a look over the polished oak table like they were already celebrating something I hadn't agreed to yet. I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on the paper in front of me, on the place where my name was supposed to go, the thin line waiting for a signature they clearly thought meant nothing. My hand hovered for a moment, and yes, it trembled. 72 years will do that to you. Arthritis doesn't ask for permission, and time doesn't slow down just because you want your hands to stay steady. You okay there? Jason asked, leaning back in his chair, his tone just polite enough to hide what was really underneath it. I nodded once. I didn't trust my voice yet. The room smelled like fresh coffee and expensive furniture polish, the kind of place designed to make everything feel official, controlled. Safe. Emily had chosen it, of course. She always did prefer environments where she felt in charge. We can help you if it's too much, she added, tilting her head slightly, that same expression she used when she was a teenager pretending to care while already planning her next move. I finally looked at her then. My daughter. The girl I had raised on my own after her father walked out with nothing but a suitcase and promises he never intended to keep. The girl whose college tuition I paid by working double shifts for almost a decade. The girl who once held my hand so tightly crossing the street that I could still remember the pressure of her fingers. She smiled at me now, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just sign where it says Margaret Collins, she said, tapping the bottom of the page with her manicured nail. That's all you need to do. All I needed to do. I almost repeated it out loud. Instead, I lowered the pen to the paper. My signature wasn't what it used to be. The letters wavered, thinner in some places, heavier in others where my hand pressed too hard trying to stay in control. I heard it then. A quiet laugh. Not loud. Not cruel enough to be obvious. Just enough. Just enough to let me know exactly what they thought they were watching. It's fine, Emily said quickly, though she wasn't talking to me. As long as it's legible, right? I didn't stop. I finished the last letter slowly, deliberately, and set the pen down in the exact center of the folder. For a moment, no one said anything. Then chairs shifted. Papers moved. A sense of relief filled the room, subtle but unmistakable. They thought it was done. They thought it was over. I folded my hands in my lap and leaned back slightly, letting the silence stretch just a little longer than it needed to, because they hadn't noticed what I had noticed. They hadn't asked what I had already asked weeks before. And they certainly hadn't read what was about to be read out loud. When the notary across the table cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, I saw Emily's smile widen just a fraction. She thought this was a formality. A final step. A victory already secured. I kept my expression still. I had signed my name. That part was true. What they didn't understand was that a signature doesn't mean surrender. Not when you know exactly what you're signing. And not when one line can change everything. The notary did not rush. That was the first thing I noticed. While Emily and Jason shifted in their seats with quiet impatience, he took his time aligning the pages, tapping them gently against the table as if precision still mattered in a room where everyone else had already decided the outcome. All right, he said finally, his voice calm, neutral, practiced. I will read the final acknowledgement before we proceed. Emily let out a soft breath, almost a laugh. That is not necessary, she said quickly. We have already gone through everything. He did not look at her. It is required, he replied, just as calmly. I watched her smile tighten, just slightly, before she leaned back again, folding her arms like she was humoring him. Jason glanced at his watch. Let us just get through it, he muttered. I said nothing. I kept my hands folded, my posture still, my eyes resting somewhere between the document and the man who was about to read it. Because this was the moment I had been waiting for. Not the signing. Not their reactions. This document, the notary began, represents a voluntary transfer of specified assets under the conditions outlined within. His voice was steady, measured, the kind of voice that made people stop and listen whether they wanted to or not. Emily nodded along, already bored. Jason reached for his phone, then thought better of it. The signer affirms that no coercion, pressure, or undue influence has been applied in the execution of this agreement. At that, Emily shifted again. Of course, she said lightly. That is standard language. He paused. Not long. Just enough. His eyes moved back to the page, then slightly upward, like he was deciding whether to continue exactly as written or to make sure every word landed. And he continued, his tone unchanged. In the event that any evidence of coercion, misrepresentation, or manipulation is later established, all transferred assets shall be considered null and void and immediately revert to the original owner. The room did not react right away. Silence does that sometimes. It gives people a second too long to process what they just heard. Jason was the first to move. Wait, he said, sitting up straighter. What does that mean? Emily did not speak. Not yet. Her eyes were fixed on the document now, not on me. The confidence in her expression had shifted into something sharper, something calculating. It means exactly what it says, the notary replied. If the transfer is found to be influenced improperly, it does not stand. I could feel the change in the room like a drop in temperature. Subtle, but undeniable. Emily leaned forward, reaching for the papers. Let me see that, she said, her voice still controlled, but no longer relaxed. I did not move. I did not need to. I had already seen it. I had seen it the first time the draft was placed in front of me weeks ago, sitting across from a different table, a different set of eyes that did not underestimate me. I had asked questions then. Quiet ones. Careful ones. The kind people do not expect from someone they have already decided is confused. It is standard. Protection, the notary added, almost as an afterthought. For all parties involved. Emily's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the page. Jason looked between us, uncertainty creeping into his expression for the first time since we sat down. I let out a slow breath, barely noticeable, and finally lifted my eyes to meet my daughter's. She did not smile this time. And for the first time that morning, neither did I. I had seen that look before. Not on Emily, not exactly like this, but I recognized it all the same. It was the look people get when something they thought was simple suddenly becomes complicated, when a situation they believed they controlled begins to shift in ways they did not expect. I did not rush to fill the silence. I let it sit there, heavy and quiet, because for years I had been the one rushing, explaining, softening every moment to keep the peace. I had learned the hard way that silence, used correctly, says far more than words ever could. Mom, Emily said finally, her voice slower now, more careful, why is that clause even in here? I tilted my head just slightly, as if I was considering her question for the first time. I assumed it was standard, I said, keeping my tone even. You heard him. She did not answer right away. Her eyes searched my face, not for confusion this time, but for something else. Something she had not needed to look for before. Doubt. Suspicion. Jason leaned forward again, resting his elbows on the table. This was not in the version we reviewed, he said, looking directly at the notary now. Are you sure about that? The notary asked calmly. I am reading exactly what is written in the final document provided to me. Provided. That word landed quietly, but I saw Emily notice it. Her fingers moved quickly, flipping through the pages, scanning lines she had clearly expected to be familiar. This does not make sense, she said under her breath. We went over this. We made sure everything was clean. Clean. I almost smiled at that. Instead, I let my gaze drift to the window behind them, where the late morning sun was casting long shadows across the parking lot. It reminded me of another morning, not long ago. Sitting in a different office, with a different man across from me. He had not laughed at my signature. He had not rushed me. He had looked at me the way professionals look at someone they understand might know more than they are letting on. Mrs. Collins, he had said, folding his hands on his desk, you should never sign anything you do not fully understand. I remember nodding slowly, because I had heard that advice my entire life. What he said next mattered more. And you should never assume that the version someone gives you is the only version that exists. I had sat with that for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I asked him. He did not smile. I am suggesting that you ask for time. Ask for review. And if something feels off, you protect yourself before anyone else thinks to. I did exactly that. I asked for copies. I asked questions. Not loudly. Not in a way that would raise concern. Just enough to learn what I needed to learn. Just enough to understand where the real leverage was. Back in the room, Emily stopped turning pages. She looked up again, her expression no longer controlled. "Mom," she said, more firmly this time, "did you review this before today?" I met her eyes without hesitation. "Of course I did," I said. "Did you?" Jason shifted beside her. The notary remained still, observing, waiting. And for the first time since they had placed those papers in front of me, I could see it clearly. They had not expected me to read anything at all. Emily did not answer my question. She just stared at me, and for a moment I could almost see the calculation happening behind her eyes, like she was trying to retrace every step that had led us here and find the exact point where things stopped going according to her plan. Jason was less subtle. "We reviewed everything," he said quickly, his voice sharper now, defensive. "Every page. Every clause." "Then you must have seen it," I replied, keeping my tone level almost gentle. That seemed to frustrate him more than anything else. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Because it was not there." The notary shifted slightly in his chair, the soft sound of paper against wood breaking the tension just enough to remind everyone that this was still an official setting, not a private argument they could reshape with louder voices. "Documents can go through revisions before final execution," he said. "It is not uncommon." Emily turned to him immediately. "Who made this revision?" she asked. "I received the final copy this morning," he answered. "As I said, I am reading what was provided." Her gaze snapped back to me. "Did you send this?" she asked. No softness now. No pretense. Just a direct question. I let a second pass before answering, not because I needed time, but because I wanted her to feel it. The pause. The shift. The difference between the way she used to speak to me and the way she was speaking now. I made sure I understood what I was signing, I said. It was not a yes. It was not a no. But it was enough. Jason exhaled sharply, leaning back again, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to reset the situation by force. "This is getting complicated for no reason," he muttered. "We are just trying to help you, Margaret." Help. That word again. I had heard it so many times over the past year that it had started to lose its meaning. It sounded kind on the surface, supportive even, but it always seemed to arrive right before a suggestion that benefited them far more than it benefited me. "You said the house was too much for me," I said quietly, not looking at either of them now. "You said managing everything alone was not safe." Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again. I continued before she could respond. "You said this was the best way to keep everything in the family. To make things easier." "Because it is," she said quickly, seizing the opening. "We are thinking long-term, Mom. This is about protecting you." I nodded once, slowly, as if I was considering her words. "That is what you told me," I said. The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt different. Not tense. Not confused. Just still. Like something had settled into place that could not be moved back. The notary glanced between us, then down at the document again, as if confirming that what he had read was still exactly what was written. "We can proceed with the notarization," he said. "Carefully, or if there are concerns, you may choose to pause and review further." Jason looked at Emily. Emily looked at me. For the first time that morning, they were not in control of the next step. I rested my hands lightly on the table and met my daughter's eyes again. "You wanted me to sign," I said. "I did." I let that sit for a moment before adding, just as calmly, "Now we make sure it says what it is supposed to say." And this time, neither of them laughed. No one spoke right away. That was the part people never talk about, the moment after something shifts, but before anyone decides how to respond to it. It is quiet, but not peaceful. It is the kind of quiet where everyone is thinking at the same time, trying to catch up to something that has already moved past them. Emily was the first to break it. "We should review this," she said, her voice controlled again, but tighter than before. "There has clearly been some kind of misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. I had heard that word used to smooth over things that were anything but accidental. Of course, the notary replied, sliding the document slightly toward the center of the table. Take your time. Jason leaned in beside her, both of them scanning the pages now with a focus that had been completely absent earlier. I watched them read. Not every word, not yet, but enough to realize that this was not the simple transfer they had expected. Their shoulders were closer now, their movements quicker, less relaxed. It was a small thing, but it told me everything I needed to know. This language is too broad, Jason said under his breath. It opens the door for interpretation. Emily nodded, flipping another page. It gives her the ability to challenge the entire transfer later, she said, quieter now, but I still heard it. I did not react. I let them keep talking, because people reveal more when they forget you are listening. That is not what we agreed on, Jason added. Agreed. I almost repeated it, but I kept my expression neutral. The notary remained still, his hands folded neatly in front of him, observing without interfering. If you have concerns, he said after a moment, you're within your rights to pause the process and seek legal counsel before proceeding. Emily looked up sharply. Pause, she repeated. We have already signed. The notarization has not been completed, he clarified. Until that step is finalized, the document is not fully executed. That landed. I saw it in the way Jason leaned back slightly, in the way Emily's fingers stopped moving across the page. They were no longer just reviewing. They were recalculating. Mom, Emily said, turning to me again, softer this time, but there was something else beneath it now. Urgency. Maybe we should slow this down. There is no rush to finalize today. I met her gaze, steady and calm. You were in a hurry earlier, I said. She hesitated, just for a second. We just wanted to help you get things organized, she replied. We still do. I nodded once. Then we should make sure everything is clear. Jason exhaled, a little too loudly, his patience starting to slip. Margaret, this is getting unnecessarily complicated, he said. It is just paperwork. I looked at him then, really looked at him, the way I should have months ago. Paperwork decides who owns what, I said quietly. It decides what stays and what goes. It decides who has control. He did not answer that. Emily's eyes moved between us, then back to the document, then back to me again. For the first time, she did not look certain. Not of the outcome. Not of me. The notary reached for his pen, tapping it lightly against the table as if waiting for a final decision that no longer felt automatic. We can proceed, he said, or we can pause. I placed my hand gently on the edge of the document, not pulling it away, not pushing it forward. Just holding it there. Let us proceed, I said. And this time, it was not a suggestion. Emily did not agree right away. I saw it in the way her jaw tightened, in the way her fingers pressed flat against the paper, like she was trying to hold something in place that was already slipping. Jason looked at her, waiting, not for my decision, but for hers. That had always been their pattern. She led. He reinforced. And until now, it had worked. We should not rush into this, she said finally, her voice quieter, but more deliberate. There is no reason to finalize today without reviewing every detail carefully. I did not move my hand from the edge of the document. You said that earlier, I replied. But not this morning. She held my gaze, and for a second I could see something familiar there, something almost like the child she used to be when she realized she had misjudged a situation and was trying to recover without admitting it. Things change, she said. When new information comes up, you adjust. I nodded slightly. Exactly. The notary cleared his throat softly, bringing the focus back to the table. If you would like to proceed, I will need to confirm that all parties understand the terms as written, he said, including the clause regarding coercion and reversion of assets. Jason exhaled again, this time slower, like he was trying to keep his frustration contained. We understand what it says, he replied, but there was less certainty in his tone now. Then I will ask directly, the notary continued, his voice steady and precise. Mrs. Collins, are you signing this document of your own free will, without pressure or influence from any party present? That question hung in the air longer than it should have. Not because it was complicated, but because of what it implied. Emily shifted in her seat, her attention locked on me now, watching every small movement, every breath, like she was trying to anticipate the exact words I would choose. Jason did not speak. He just waited. I looked down at the paper again, at my name written in ink that still felt fresh, slightly uneven but unmistakably mine. I thought about all the times I had signed things without question. School forms, loan papers, medical documents. Every signature given in trust, in urgency, in the belief that the people around me had my best interest at heart. I lifted my eyes again, meeting the notary's calm, expectant expression. "Yes," I said. My voice did not shake. It did not hesitate. "I am signing this of my own free will." I saw the flicker of relief pass through Jason's face, quick but real. Emily did not relax. She kept watching me, her expression unreadable now, as if she was still trying to find something she had missed. The notary nodded once. "And you understand that if any evidence of coercion is later presented, the terms of this document may be invalidated and all assets returned?" he asked. "I understand," I replied. This time, I did not look at the paper. I looked at Emily. Directly. Clearly. Long enough that she could not pretend she did not feel it. Something shifted again in her eyes. Not confusion. Not frustration. Something closer to realization, though she did not yet have the full shape of it. The notary reached for his seal, positioning the document carefully in front of him. "Then we will proceed with notarization," he said. The sound of the stamp pressing into the paper was soft, almost insignificant. But it marked the moment everything became official. Jason let out a breath he had been holding, leaning back in his chair again, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. Emily did not move. She was still looking at me, waiting, trying to understand why I had not resisted, why I had not argued, why I had agreed so easily. I folded my hands again, resting them lightly in my lap. Calm. Still. Exactly as I had been from the beginning. Because the truth was, I had never needed to stop them from taking anything. I just needed them to believe they already had. The sound of the stamp faded quickly, but the weight of it stayed in the room. Jason leaned back further in his chair, stretching his arms slightly like a man who had just finished something tedious, but necessary. "Good," he said under his breath. "Now we can finally move forward." Emily did not respond. Her eyes were still on me, studying, searching, like she was trying to solve something that no longer followed the pattern she expected. The notary began organizing the documents, sliding copies into neat stacks, his movements methodical and precise. "I will prepare certified copies for each of you," he said. "The original will be filed as required." "Thank you," Jason replied quickly, already reaching for one of the folders as if possession had already transferred in his mind. I watched his hand pause just short of the paper, waiting for the notary's signal. Small details. Like that matter. People reveal what they believe is theirs long before it actually is. Emily finally shifted, sitting back slowly, her posture no longer relaxed, but controlled in a different way. "We should discuss next steps," she said, her voice even, but there was a new layer beneath it now. Not confidence. Not comfort. Something closer to caution. "There are still logistical details to handle." "Of course," I said. "There always are." The notary slid one copy toward me, another toward Emily and Jason. "Please review your copies before leaving," he added. "If there are any questions, now is the time to address them." Jason picked up his set immediately, flipping to the section that mattered most to him. I could tell by the speed of his movements, by the way his eyes scanned instead of read. He was looking for confirmation, not understanding. Emily was slower. She turned each page carefully, her eyes moving line by line now, not skipping, not assuming. That was new. I waited. I did not rush them. I did not speak. Because this part was not about what I would say. It was about what they would finally see. "This references a separate trust," Emily said suddenly, her voice quieter but sharper than before. Jason looked up. "What?" She flipped back a page, then forward again, her finger tracing a line she had not noticed earlier. "Right here," she said. "It says the assets listed are subject to prior designation under an existing trust agreement." Jason frowned, leaning closer. That is just standard language, he said quickly. It does not change anything. It changes everything if the trust predates this transfer, she replied, her voice tightening. I said nothing. I let them read it again. And again. The notary did not interrupt. He simply watched, the way someone does when they recognize a moment unfolding exactly as it should. Mom, Emily said after a long pause, not looking up from the page this time. What trust is this referring to? I folded my hands together, resting them lightly on the table, and answered just as calmly as I had all morning. The one I set up before you ever brought me these papers. Jason sat back abruptly, the confidence from earlier gone entirely now. That was not disclosed, he said, his voice sharper than before. It was not asked, I replied. Emily slowly lifted her eyes to meet mine, and this time there was no calculation left. Only realization, clear and undeniable. So this transfer, she said carefully, it does not actually give us control over the assets we thought it did. I held her gaze, steady and unflinching. It gives you exactly what the document says it gives you, I answered. And for the first time since we sat down at that table, they both understood that what they thought they were taking had never really been mine to give. The air in the room felt different now. Not tense in the way it had been before, but exposed, like something carefully hidden had been brought into the light and no one could pretend they did not see it anymore. Jason was the first to break the silence, his voice sharper, less controlled than at any point before. So what exactly are we signing here? He asked, holding the document up slightly as if the paper itself might give him a different answer if he looked at it from another angle. The notary did not rush to respond. He glanced at me first, then back at Jason. You are signing an agreement based on the terms outlined, he said calmly. Those terms include references to prior legal structures that may affect how assets are managed or distributed. That is not what we were told, Jason replied, his frustration no longer hidden. Emily did not interrupt him this time. She was still looking at the page, but she was no longer reading. She was thinking, replaying, adjusting. Mom, she said slowly, her voice quieter now but more focused, when did you set up this trust? I did not look away from her. Before you ever brought me your version of these papers, I said. The word version landed harder than anything else I had said so far. Jason let out a short, disbelieving breath. So you knew, he said. You knew exactly what we were trying to do. I tilted my head slightly. I knew what you asked me to sign, I replied. And I made sure I understood it. Emily finally set the document down, her hands resting flat on the table. She was no longer trying to control the situation. She was trying to understand it. This trust, she said, choosing her words carefully now, it holds the primary assets, does it not? I nodded once. Yes. And this transfer, she continued, gesturing toward the paper between us, only applies to what remains outside of that trust. That is correct. Jason stared at her, then back at me. How much is outside the trust? He asked. I did not answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because the number itself was not the point. Enough, I said finally. But not what you thought. That was when the realization fully settled in. Not just for Emily. For both of them. I saw it in the way Jason leaned back, no longer reaching for the document like it was something to claim. I saw it in the way Emily's shoulders lowered, not in defeat, but in recognition. They had not been negotiating from a position of control. They had been reacting to information they did not fully have. The notary closed the folder in front of him with a soft, deliberate motion. If there are no further questions, he said, the notarization is complete. No one responded immediately. The finality of that statement seemed to settle over the table like a quiet verdict. Emily looked at me again, but this time there was no edge in her expression. No calculation. Just something raw. Why did you not tell me? She asked. It was not accusatory. It was something else. I considered the question for a moment before answering. Because you did not ask, I said. The words were simple, direct, and they carried more weight than anything I had raised my voice to say. Jason shook his head slightly, still trying to piece together a version of events that made sense to him. This changes everything, he muttered. I did not disagree. No, I said quietly. It just reveals what was already there. And in that moment, there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to negotiate, and nothing left to misunderstand. No one moved right away. That was the part that stayed with me the longest, not the words, not the document, but the stillness that followed when everything finally settled into place. Jason looked down at the paper in front of him, then back at me, like he was seeing something different now, something he had not considered before. Emily did not look away. She held my gaze, steady this time, not searching, not calculating, just present in a way she had not been when we first sat down. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. It was not a demand. It was not a strategy. It was a question. A real one. I took a slow breath before answering, not because I needed to think, but because I wanted the moment to land exactly where it needed to. "Now," I said, "everything stays exactly where it belongs." Jason let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You could have just said no," he muttered. "You did not have to do all this." I turned my attention to him then, not sharply, not with anger, just with clarity. "You were not asking for a no," I said. "You were asking for a signature." That seemed to stop him. Not completely, but enough. Emily shifted slightly in her chair, her hands resting loosely on the table now, no longer gripping the edges of anything. "I thought we were helping you," she said, and for the first time all morning, her voice did not carry that polished confidence. It sounded smaller. Younger. I nodded once. "That is what you told me," I replied. I did not raise my voice. I did not add anything more to it. I did not need to. The notary stood quietly, gathering the remaining papers, giving us space without leaving, the way someone does when they understand that the most important part of a process is not the paperwork, but what happens after it is done. Jason pushed his chair back slightly, the legs making a soft sound against the floor. "We should go," he said, not looking at either of us now. Emily did not move right away. She stayed where she was, her eyes still on me, like she was trying to hold on to something that had already shifted beyond her reach. "Mom," she said finally, "I did not think you would." She stopped. She did not finish the sentence. I waited, but she did not continue. "I know," I said. And I did. That was the simplest part of all of it. I stood up slowly, studying myself with one hand on the table, not because I needed the support, but because I chose to take my time. No rush. No pressure. Not anymore. I picked up my copy of the document and held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, not as a burden, but as something settled. Decided. Mine. I looked at Emily one last time, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with something quieter. Something firmer. "I did not forget how to sign my name," I said. I just stopped letting other people decide what it was worth. Neither of them answered. There was nothing left to say that would change what had already been done. I turned and walked toward the door, each step measured, unhurried, the sound of it soft against the floor. Behind me, I could feel their silence, heavier now than anything they had said all morning. I did not look back. I did not need to, because I had not lost anything in that room. I had only let go of the idea that I ever needed their approval to keep what was already